welfare check was routine, a landlord, an overdue rent, a smell coming from apartment 213 that 2 other tenants had complained about for a week. The officer knocked 3 times. No answer. He used the landlord's key. And in the 11 years he had been on the force, nothing had prepared him for what was inside that apartment. Not the training, not the experience, not anything. He backed out into the hallway, sat down on the floor, and didn't stand up for a long time. His name was Officer Dale Prout, and what he found inside apartment 213 would become the most disturbing case in the history of Spokane, Washington. Spokane, Washington, January 2017. The Ridgeline Apartment Complex. Budget housing, transient tenants, the kind of building where nobody asked questions and nobody expected answers. Apartment 213 was registered to a man named Conrad Vess, 39 years old, unemployed, no family on record. Neighbors described him as quiet, kept to himself, occasionally strange, but never threatening. He had lived there for 14 months. When Officer Prout finally re-entered the apartment with backup, the source of the smell became immediately clear. The refrigerator and freezer were full, not with groceries. The contents were human remains, carefully sectioned, wrapped in butcher paper, labeled in black marker with dates going back 11 months. In the living room, a journal, leather-bound, filled front to back in neat handwriting. Not a confession, a record, detailed, clinical, organized, like a man documenting a hobby he was proud of. Conrad Vess had not simply killed. He had been doing this systematically for nearly a year. The forensic investigation that followed was unlike anything the Spokane Medical Examiner's Office had ever processed. DNA analysis of the remains identified for separate individuals, all male, all between the ages of 24 and 41, all from the same demographic, transient, homeless, no immediate family actively searching for them, men the system had already made invisible. 3 were identified through DNA databases within 6 weeks. All 3 had been reported missing, one by a shelter worker, one by a case manager, one by a former roommate. All 3 reports had been filed and essentially stalled. The 4th victim was never identified. He remains a John Doe to this day. The journal, which prosecutors would later describe in court as the most disturbing piece of evidence any of them had ever presented to a jury, detailed every encounter, going back to February 2016, how Conrad had found each man, how he had gained their trust, how he had lured them to the apartment with the promise of food, warmth, cash, and what had happened inside those walls afterward. The journal described everything in the same calm, detached handwriting throughout, like he felt nothing, because he did. Conrad Vess had no prior convictions, no psychiatric history on record, held a steady job as a data entry clerk for 6 years before being laid off in 2015, by all external measures completely unremarkable. But forensic psychiatrist Dr. Ellen Marsh, who evaluated Conrad for trial testimony, described what she found as one of the most complete cases of what she called predatory psychopathy she had encountered in 22 years of practice. 0 emotional response to victims, 0 remorse, 0 recognition that what he had done was wrong in any human sense. During evaluation, Conrad told Dr. Marsh, "They weren't going anywhere. Nobody was looking for them. I just made a decision about resources. He said it the way someone might explain reorganizing a pantry. Dr. Marsh testified that Conrad had not acted out of rage, trauma, or psychological break. He had acted out of pure, calculated indifference to human life, which she told the jury was far more dangerous than any of those other things. The trial lasted 16 days. The defense attempted an insanity plea. The prosecution destroyed it in 4 hours. The journal, read in full by the lead prosecutor in open court, silenced the courtroom completely. Jurors who had been taking notes stopped writing. Several could not maintain eye contact with the evidence table. The judge called a recess after the third entry was read aloud. When court resumed, 3 jurors had requested counseling. Conrad Vess sat through the entire reading without expression. Not once did he look away. Not once did he show anything resembling discomfort. The jury deliberated for 1 hour and 57 minutes. For counts of first-degree murder, guilty on every single count. Conrad Vess was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was delivered, he nodded once, like it was a reasonable outcome to a reasonable process, and said nothing. The Ridgeline Apartment Complex was condemned 6 months after the trial. Demolished in 2018, the lot still sits empty. 3 of the 4 victims have names now. Families who were found after the case made national news. People who had lost touch, moved on, assumed the worst, but never knew. The 4th man, the one nobody ever claimed, was buried in a municipal cemetery in Spokane. His grave marker reads simply, John Doe, 2017, known to God. Officer Dale Prout retired from the force in 2019, 2 years after walking into apartment 213. In his retirement interview, he was asked what the hardest part of the job had been. He said, knowing that 4 men walked into that building looking for something warm, something safe, something human, and finding the opposite of all 3. The most dangerous predators in human history have rarely looked dangerous at all. Conrad Vess looked like a data entry clerk. He looked like nobody. That was the whole point. Subscribe for more true crime stories, brutal and disturbing cases every week.